light and his compass. To possess knowledge is to be master of divine powers and magical words. Ignorance would leave him a prey to all sorts of leers, in-wait, and cunning enemies. He triumphs continually through his knowledge of the way, like a traveler with his chart and previous acquaintanceship with the local language, hence the need of the gnosis and of initiation in the mysteries. Those who knew the real name of the god were in possession of the word that represented power over the divinity. Therefore, the word of power that would be efficacious if employed. Instead of calling on the name of God in prayer, they made use of the name as the word of God. And as these words and mysteries of magic were contained in the writings, it was necessary to know the writings in which the gnosis was religiously preserved to be in possession of the words of power. Hence the phrases of great magical efficacy in the ritual are called the words that compel. They compel the favorable action of the superhuman power to which appeal is made. To make magic was to act the appeal in a language of signs, which, like the words, were also intended to compel, and to act thus magically was a mode of compelling, forcing, and binding the superhuman powers. Magic was also a mode of covenanting with the power apprehended in the elements. The quid pro quo being blood, this was a most primitive form of blood covenant. Giving blood for food was giving life for the means of living. The ritual opens with a resurrection, but this is the resurrection in the earth of Amenta, not in the heaven of eternity. It is the resurrection of a body-soul emerging in the similitude of the moon, God from the dark of death. The first words of the ritual are, O bull of Amenta Osiris, it is taught, the everlasting king, who is here. He has come as one of the powers that fight to secure the triumph of Osiris over all his adversaries. After the life on earth, there was a resurrection in Amenta, the earth of eternity, for the human soul evolved on earth. I was there that the claim to the resurrection in spirit and to life eternal in heaven had to be made good and established by long and painful experiences and many kinds of purgatorial purification, by which the soul was perfected eventually as an ever-living spirit. The word of promise had to be performed and made truth indeed, for the Keru of immortality to be earned and endless continuity of life assured. Everyone who died was in possession of a body-soul that passed into Amenta to become an Osiris or an image of the god in matter, although it was not everyone who was reborn or regenerated in the likeness of Ra to attain the Horishhood, which was portrayed as the hood of the divine hawk. Emergence in Amenta was the coming forth of the human soul from the coffin and from the gloom of the grave in some form of personality, such as is depicted in the shade or the Ba, a bird of soul with the human head, which shows that a human soul is signified. Osiris, the god of Amenta in a mummy form, is thus addressed by the Osiris N, or Manes. O breathless one, let me live and be saved after death. Ach. 41. This is addressed to Osiris who lives eternally. Though lying as a mummy in Amenta, breathless and without motion, he will be self-resuscitated to rise again. Salvation is renewal for another life. To be saved is not to suffer the second death, not to die a second time. According to Egyptian thought, the saved are the living, and the twice dead are the damned. Life after death is salvation of the soul, and those not saved are those who die the second death, a fate that could not be escaped by any false belief in the merits of Horus or the efficacy of the atoning blood. There was no heaven to be secured for them by proxy. The ritual is not a book of beautiful sentiments, like the poetic literature of later times. It is a record of the things done by the dramatis personae in the Karaite mysteries. But now and again, the beauty of feeling breaks out ineffably upon the face of it, as in the chapter by which the deceased prevails over his adversaries, the powers of darkness, and comes forth to the day, saying, O thou who shinest forth from the moon, thou that givest light from the moon, let me come forth at large amid thy train, and be revealed as one of those in glory. Let the Tuat be opened for me, here am I. The speaker is in Amenta, as a mummy soul appealing to the Father of Lights and Lord of Spirits, that he may come forth in the character of Horus divinized to delight the soul of his poor mother. He wishes to capitalize the desires of those who make salutations to the gods on his behalf. These in modern parlance would be the prayers of the priests and congregation, she. 3. for his welfare and safety in the future life, otherwise for his salvation. In the chapter by which one cometh forth today he pleads, "Let me have possession of all things soever which were offered ritualistically for me in the nether world. Let me have possession of the table of offerings which was heaped for me on earth, the solicitations which were uttered for me, that he may feed upon the bread of Seb, or the food of earth. Let me have possession of my funeral meals, the meals offered on earth for the dead in the funerary chamber." K. 68. The chief object of the deceased on entering Amenta is the mode and means of getting out again as soon as possible upon the other side. His one all-absorbing interest is the resurrection to eternal life. He says, "Let me reach the land of ages. Let me gain the land of eternity, for thou, my Lord, hast destined them for me." Co 13. Osiris, or the Osiris, passed into Amenta as the Lord of Transformations. Various changes of shape were necessitated by the various modes of progression. As a beetle or a serpent, he passed through solid earth, as a crocodile through the water, as a hawk through the air. As a jackal or a cat he saw in the dark, as an ibis he was the knowing one, or he of the nose. Thus he was the master of transformations, the magician of the later folk tales, who could change his shape at will. Tot is termed the great magician as the lord of transformations in the moon. Thus the deceased, in assuming the type of Tot, becomes a master of transformation, or the magician whose transformations had also been made on earth by the transformers in trance who pointed the way to transformation in death. When Teta comes to consciousness on rising again in Amenta, he is said to have broken his sleep forever, which was in the dwelling of Seb, that is, on the earth. He has now received his Sahu, or investiture of the glorious body. Before the mortal Manes could attain the ultimate state of spirit in the image of Horus the immortal, he must be put together part by part, as was Osiris, the dismembered god. He is divinized in the likeness of various divinities, all of whom had been included as powers in the person of the one true God, Neberter, the Lord entire. Every member and part of the Manes in Amenta has to be fashioned afresh in a new creation. The new heart is said to be shaped by certain gods in the nether world, according to the deeds done in the body whilst the person was living on the earth. He assumes the glorified body that is formed feature by feature and limb after limb in the likeness of the gods, until there is no part of the Manes that remains undivinized. He is given the hair of Nu, or heaven, the eyes of Hathor, ears of Apwat, nose of Kentikas, lips of Anup, teeth of Serk, neck of Isis, hands of the mighty lord of Tatu, shoulders of Neith, back of Sut, phallus of Osiris, legs and thighs of Nut, feet of Ta, with nails and bones of the living Uri, until there is not a limb of him that is without a god. There is no possibility of coming back to earth for a new body or for a re-entry into the old mummy. As the man says, his soul is not bound to his old body at the gates of Amenta, 26:6. Chapter 89 is designated the chapter by which the soul is united to the body. This, however, does not mean the dead body on earth, but the format or bodily type of the mummy in Amenta. "Here I come," says the speaker, "that I may overthrow mine adversaries upon the earth, though my dead body be buried." 86, Renouf. "Let me come forth today and walk upon my own legs. Let me have the feet of the glorified." 86. At this stage he exclaims, "I am a soul, and my soul is divine. It is the eternal force." In chapters 21 and 22 the Manes asks for his mouth, that he may speak with it. Having his mouth restored, he asks that it may be opened by Ta, and that Tot may loosen the fetters or muzzles of Sut, the power of darkness. 23. In short, that he may recover the faculty of speech. In the process of transforming and being renewed as the new man, the second Adam, he says, "I am Khepera," the self produced upon his mother's thigh. Khepera is the beetle, type of the sun that is portrayed in pictures of the goddess Nut, proceeding from the mother's Khepsh. The name of the beetle signifies becoming and evolving, hence it is a type of the becomer in making his transformation. The mouth being given, words of power are brought to him, he also gathers them from every quarter. Then he remembers his name. Next, the new heart is given to him. His jaws are parted, his eyes are opened. Power is given to his arms and vigor to his legs. He is in possession of his heart, his mouth, his eyes, his limbs, and his speech. He is now a new man, reincorporated in the body of a Sahu, with a soul that is no longer bound to the cot or dead mummy at the gates of Amenta, H. 26. He looks forward to being fed upon the food of Osiris in Aru, on the eastern side of the mead of amaranthine flowers. In one phase of the drama, the deceased is put together bone by bone in correspondence to the backbone of Osiris. The backbone was an emblem of sustaining power, and this reconstruction of deceased is in the likeness of the mutilated god. The speaker at this point says, "The 4 fastenings of the hinder part of my head are made firm." He does not fall at the block. There are, of course, 7 cervical vertebrae in the backbone altogether, but 3 of these are peculiar. The atlas, which supports the head, the axis upon which the head turns, and the vertebrae prominence, with its long spiral process. 30. Renouf. No doubt the Osiris was rebuilt upon this model, and the 4 joints were fundamental. They constituted a 4-fold foundation. In another passage, the Osiris is apparently perfected upon the square, as in the Masonic Mysteries. It is the chapter by which one assumes the form of Ptah, the great architect of the universe. The speaker says, "He is 4 times the arm's length of Ra, 4 times the width of the world." Writ, ch. 82, Renouf, which is a mode of describing the 4 quarters or 4 sides of the earth as represented by the Egyptians. There were 7 primary powers in the mythical and astronomical phases, 6 of whom are represented by zootypes, and the 7th is imaged in the likeness of a man. This is repeated in the eschatology, where the highest soul of 7 is the Ka-Eidolon, with a human face and figure as the final type of spirit which was human on the earth, and is to be eternal in the heavens. The Manes, who is being reconstituted, says, "The 7 Uraeus divinities are my body. My image is eternal," c. 85, as it would be when the 7 souls were amalgamated into one that was imaged by the divine Ka. The 7 Uraeus divinities represented the 7 souls of life that were anterior to the one enduring soul. In the chapter of propitiating one's own Ka, the Manes says, "Hail to thee, my Ka! May I come to thee and be glorified and made manifest and ensouled." Io 3, that is, in attaining the highest of the souls, the unifying one. These souls may be conceived as 7 ascending types of personality. The first is figured as the shade, the dark soul or shade of the Inuits, the Greenlanders, and other aboriginal races, which is portrayed personally in the ritual lying darkly on the ground. The shade was primary, because of its being, as it were, a shadow of the old body projected on the ground in the new life. It is portrayed as a black figure stretched out in Amenta. In this way, the earth shadow of the body in life served as the type of a soul that passed out of the body in death. This may explain the intimate relationship of the shade to the physical mummy, which it is sometimes said to cling to and remain with in the tomb, and to draw sustenance from the corpse so long as it exists. Thus, the shade that draws life from the dead body becomes the mythical prototype of the vampire and the legendary ghoul. It may be difficult to determine exactly what the Egyptians understood by the kabit or shade in its genesis as a soul, but the Inuit or Aleutians describe it as a vapor emanating from the blood. And here is wisdom for those who comprehend it. The earliest human soul, derived from the mother when the blood was looked upon as the life, was a soul of blood, and the Inuit description answers perfectly to the shade in the Egyptian Amenta. Amongst the most primitive races, the typical basis of a future personality is the shade. The Aleutians say the soul at its departure divides into the shade and the spirit. The first dwells in the tomb, the other ascends to the firmament. These, wherever met with, are equivalent to the twin souls of Sut the Dark One and Horus the Soul of Light. For we reckon the Egyptian 7 to be earliest and old enough to account for and explain the rest, which are to be found dispersed about the world. The soul as shade or shadow is known to the Makusi Indians as the man in the eyes, who does not die. This is another form of the shadow that was not cast upon the ground. Dr. Birch drew attention to the fact that whilst the deceased has but one Ba, one Sahu, and one Ka, he has 2 shades, his Kabti being in the plural, trans, Society of Bib, Arch, Volume Vite V, page 391. These 2 correspond to the dark and light shades of the Aborigines. They also conform to the 2 souls of darkness and light that were imaged by the black vulture and the golden hawk of Sut and Horus, the first 2 of the total septenary of powers or souls. The The shade, however, is but 1/7 of the series. The other self, when perfected, consists of 7 amalgamated souls. Some of the mains in Amenta do not get beyond the state of the shade or kabit. They are arrested in this condition of mummied immobility. They do not acquire the new heart or soul of breath. They remain in the egg unhatched and do not become the ba soul or the glorified ku. These are the souls that are said to be eaten by certain of the gods or infernal powers. Eater of the Shades is the title of the fourth of the 42 executioners, Chait 125. The 10th of the mystical abodes in Amenta is the place of the monstrous arms that capture and carry away the mains who have not attained a condition beyond that of the shade or empty shell. The shells of the theosophists may be met with in the ritual. The mains who is fortified with his divine soul can pass this place in safety. He says, "Let no one take possession of my shade. Let no one take possession of my shell or envelope. I am the divine hawk." He has issued from the shell of the egg and been established beyond the status of the shade as a basoul. With this may be compared the superstition that in eating eggs one should always break up the empty shell, lest it should be made evil use of by the witches. There are wretched shades condemned to immobility in the 5th of the mystical abodes. They suffer their final arrest in that place and position, and are then devoured by the giants who live as eaters of the shades. These monsters are described as having thigh bones 7 cubits long. Shesh 149:18-19. No mere shade has power enough to pass by these personifications of devouring might. They are the ogres of legendary lore, who may be found at home with the ghoul and the vampire in the dark caverns of the Egyptian underworld. These were the dead whose development in spirit world was arrested at the status of the shade, and who were supposed to seek the life they lacked by haunting and preying upon human souls, particularly on the soul of blood. In its next stage, the soul is called a ba, and is represented as a hawk with a human head, to show that the nature of the soul is human still. This is more than a soul of shade, but it was not imagined nor believed that the human soul as such inhabited the body of a bird. In one of the hells, the shades are seen burning, but these were able to resist the fire, and it is consequently said, "The shades live, they have raised their powers." They are raised in status by assimilating higher powers. Following his taking possession of the soul of shade and the soul of light, the Osiris is given a new heart, his whole or two-fold heart. With some of the primitive folk, as with the Basutos, it is the heart that goes out in death as the soul that never dies. Bobadilla learned from the Indians of Nicaragua that there are 2 different hearts, that one of these went away with the deceased in death, and that it was the heart that went away which made them live hereafter. This other breathing heart, the basis of the future being, is one with the Egyptian heart by which the reconstituted person lives again. The heart that was weighed in the hall of judgment could not have been the organ of life on earth. This was a second heart, the heart of another life. The mains makes appeal for this heart not to bear evidence against him in presence of the God who is at the balance, which is 30a and 30b. The second is the heart that was fashioned anew, according to the life lived in the body. It is said to be the heart of the great god Tehuti, who personated intelligence. Therefore it would seem to typify the soul of intelligence. Hence it is said to be young and keen of insight among the gods, or among the 7 souls. The physical representation comes first, but it is said in the text of Panchamisus, the conscience or heart, Abe, of a man is his own god, or divine judge. The new heart represents rebirth and is therefore called the mother, 30a. And when the deceased recovers the basis of future being in his whole heart, he says, although he is buried in the deep, deep grave and bowed down to the region of annihilation, he is glorified even there. 30a, Renouf. Now if we take the shade to image a soul of blood, the Bahawk to image a soul of light, and the haughty heart to represent a soul of breath, we can perceive a raison d'etre for the offering of blood, of lights, and of incense, as sacrifices to the mains in 3 different phases or states. Blood was generally offered to the shades, as we see in survival among the Greeks and Romans. The shade was in the first stage of the past existence, and most needing in Amenta the blood which was the life on earth and held to be of first. 4161. necessity for the revivifying of the dead as manas or shades. The Sekhem was one of the souls or powers. It is difficult to identify this with a type and place in the seven. Pro turn, we call it fourth of the series. It is more important to know what force it represents. The name is derived from the word chem, for potency. Chem in physics signifies erectile power. The man of 30 years as typical adult is kempt. Sekhem denotes having the power or potency of the erectile force. In the eschatological phase, it is the reproducing, formative power of chem, or amsu, to re-erect, the power of erection being applied to the spirit in fashioning and vitalizing the new and glorious body for the future resurrection from Amenta. The Ku is a soul in which the person has attained the status of the pure in spirit, called the glorified, represented in the likeness of a beautiful white bird. The Kayat is a type of eternal duration in which the sevenfold personality is unified at last for permanent or everlasting life. It is the Ku that is thus addressed in the tomb as the glorified one. Thou shalt not be imprisoned by those who are attached to the person of Osiris, that is, the mummy, and who have custody of souls and spirits, and who shut up the shades of the dead. It is heaven only that shall hold thee. Writ. 92. The shade of itself could never leave the tomb. For this reason it was commonly held that the shade remained with the corpse or mummy on the earth. But here the tomb, the mummy, and the shade are not on earth. They are in Amenta. Without the basol, the shade remains unvivified. Without the Sekhem, it lacks essential form or power of re-arising. Without the Ku spirit, the person does not ascend from the sepulchre or prison house of the nether world. But when this has been attained, the deceased is glorified. If chapter 91 is known, he taketh the form of a fully equipped Ku spirit in the nether world, and does not suffer imprisonment at any door in Amenta, either in coming in or going out. Renuf c. 91. It is only when the mains is invested as a Ku that he ascends to the Father as a Son of God. So we gather from the following words addressed to Horus by the person who is now a Ku. O mighty one, who seest thy Father, and who hast charge of the books of Tot, here am I come, and am glorified and filled with soul and power, and am provided with the scriptures of Tot, his copy of the book of life, his light in the darkness of Amenta. He now ascends to Ra his Father, who is in the bark, and exclaims again and again, I am a powerful Ku, let thy soundness be my soundness. Renuf. 105. When the deceased has been made perfect as a Ku, he is free to enter the great house of 7 halls. 145. Likewise the house of him who is upon the hill, and who is ruler in the divine hall. The great house is the heaven of Osiris based upon the 36 gates or duodecans of the zodiac. The other is the house of Anup at the summit of the mount in Anu. Behold me, he exclaims, behold me, I am come to you, and have carried off and put together my forms, or constituent parts of the permanent soul, which were 7 altogether. These are 1. The Kabit or dark shade, 2. The Ba or light shade, 3. The breathing heart, 4. The Sekhem, 5. The Sahu, 6. The Ku, 7. The Ka. When the mains has become a Ku, the Kea is still a typical ideal ahead of him, so far ahead or aloof that he propitiates it with offerings. In fact, he presents himself as the sacrificial victim that would die to attain conjunction with his Ka, his image of eternal duration, his type of totality, in which the 7 souls were permanently unified in one at last. The Ka has been called the double of the dead, as if it simply represented the doppelganger. But it is not merely a phantom of the living or personal image of the departed. It serves also for the apparition or revenant. It is a type rather than a portrait. It is a type that was prenatal. It images a soul which came into existence with the child, a soul which is food and sustenance to the body all through life, a soul of existence here and of duration for the life hereafter. Hence it is absorbed at last in the perfected personality. It is depicted in the temple of Luxor, where the birth of Amen, Hetep III, is portrayed as coming from the hand of God. The Ka of the royal infant is shown in the pictures being formed by Knum the molder on the potter's wheel. It is in attendance on the person all life through, as the genius or guardian angel, and the fulfillment of the personality is effected by a final reunion with the Ka. As already shown, when divine honors were paid to the pharaoh, the offerings were made to his Ka, not to his mortal self. Thus, the mines in Amenta makes an offering of incense to purify himself in propitiation of his Ka, H. 105. There is a chapter of providing food for the Ka. Also, the mortuary meal was eaten in the chamber of the Ka, the resurrection chamber of the sepulchre. Food was offered to the Ka eidolon as the representative of the departed, instead of directly to the spirits of the ancestors. It was set up there as receiver, general of the offerings. Also, the food was presented to it as a type of the divine food which sustained the human soul. Thus, when the divine sustenance is offered by the god or goddess to the soul of the mortal on the earth, or to the manes in Amenta, it is presented by the giver to the Ka. Certain priests were appointed to be ministers to the Ka, and these made the offerings to the Ka of the deceased on behalf of the living relatives. This is because the Ka was the type of personality, seventh of the seven souls attained as the highest, in which the others were to be included and absorbed. In the vignettes to chapter 25 of the ritual, Neville, Tot. 25, Volag I, p. 36, the deceased is shown his Ka, which is with him in the passage of Amenta, not left behind him in the tomb, that he may not forget himself, as we might say, or, as he says, that he may not suffer loss of identity by forgetting his name. Showing the Ka to him enables the manes to recall his name in the great house, and especially in the crucible of the house of flame. When the deceased is far advanced on his journey through Amenta, his Ka is still accompanying him, and it is described as being the food of his life in spirit world, even as it had been his spiritual food in the human life. Thou art come, Osiris, thy Ka is with thee. Thou feedest thyself under thy name of Ka, 128.6. When the Osiris has passed from the state of a shade to the stage of the Ka, he will become what the ritual designates a fully equipped manes who has completed his investiture. As a Sahu, he was reincorporated in a spiritual body. As a Ku, he was invested with a robe of glory. As a sacred hawk, with the head of a Bennu, he was endowed with the soul of Horus, Hut 78. It was here he exclaimed, "Behold me, I am come to you, the gods and the glorified, and have carried off my forms and united them." But in chapter 92, he was anxiously looking forward to the day of reckoning, when he said, "Let the way be open to my soul and my shade, that I may see the great God within his sanctuary on the day of the soul's reckoning." When all hearts and words are weighed, he is not yet one of the spirits made perfect, being neither judged nor justified. He has to pass his last examination, and is now approaching the great hall of judgment for his trial. He says, "I am come that I may secure my suit in Abydos, the mythical birthplace of Osiris." This is the final trial of the long series through which he has hitherto successfully passed. Writ. C. 27, Renouf. He has now arrived at the judgment hall. It has been asserted that the deeds which the deceased had done here on earth in no wise influenced the fate that awaited the man after death. Maspero, Egyptian Archaeology. Eng, p. 149. But how so, when the new heart which was given to the deceased in Amenta, where he or she was reconstituted, is said to be fashioned in accordance with what he has done in his human life? And the speaker pleads that his new heart may not be fashioned according to all the evil things that may be said against him. Writ. C. 27.